There is nothing better in D&D than when your party has an encounter and every member of the group is contributing to the battle. You've got the fighters up front wielding death with their weapons, the cleric just behind buffing them with blesses and healing those that fall. You've got a rogue sneaking around to make an attack from behind. You've got the spellcasters wielding death with their fingertips. But sometimes, if you don't have enough party members, you can't get that full experience. That's why today I'm going to give you 6 reasons why you should use hirelings in your homebrewed campaign. Hello again, I'm KR King, and this is my YouTube channel dedicated to homebrewing a D&D campaign. Today I'm talking about hirelings. I've noticed on YouTube and some of the players I've talked to, they're sort of the younger players or whatever, there's this sort of, I don't know the resistance, but they don't think about using hireling. They don't think about NPCs with their campaign. And I'm here to give you these 6 reasons why I think it's a good idea. I'm from a tradition of playing from the 70s when we always used hirelings. Not just because we didn't have enough players, but it was in the original box set of books, how to have hirelings. And by hireling, I don't mean, like a baggage bearer or wagon driver, or even some common archer. I mean an adventurer, an NPC with a character class just like your players, probably at a level near them. These are adventurers with their own goals and motivations. They're there to help your players, whether it's on a specific mission or whether it's just to get booty and treasure like anyone else. So my 6 reasons for using hirelings are party composition, information, battle tactics, class experience, realistic adventuring, and intrigue. And I'm going to go over each of these because they're all really relevant to running a D&D campaign. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is party composition. When your players roll up their characters, you want to give them the freedom to choose whatever they want, regardless of how this is going to work out in terms of having a party. So they may all want to be spellcasters, or no one wants to be a cleric, or no one wants to be a fighter. They see, the spellcasters eventually get more power. Now you can, alter with homebrewed rules or whatever to make classes even more compatible. But if you really want to give them this freedom, then you can have NPCs, hirelings that come around to fill out and make your party composed in a balanced way. You may have a special situation where you need a character like a rogue or something, and you don't have any player characters that have that character class. So you can use an NPC, a hireling rogue, in that situation for that expedition. And the great thing about using these hirelings is if they run for a long time with the players, they can almost become part of the group. I had a group I ran in college and then a few years beyond, and we had a fighter named Holden, NPC, imaginary guy. He ran with this group for so long, he went from 1st to 10th level. He became such a part of this group that at one point he was held hostage by ogres, and they were going to sacrifice him to some god. And the players got together and were like, we can't let Holden die, and they organized an expedition to free him. An expedition someone might get killed. And they did this for an imaginary character. Why? Because he was part of their group. He was real. This is the power of D&D. This is what makes it the greatest game ever. Now again, I didn't let them do things that would put him in danger, but I also had him be loyal and take chances and be part of the group. And this is important because yes, you're rounding out your party composition. You're trying to get a situation where you have fighters, healers, spellcasters, and whatever other specialized characters that you want. The player characters are going to run this NPC in the battle. You're going to give them their hit bonus, you can give them their hit points and let the players keep track of that. If they have some special or secret item, when the NPC or the hireling first comes on, they may not want to talk about that. But eventually, if they become part of the group, they will reveal more and more if they have some item. So the next thing that an NPC and a hireling brings to your group is information. Because they've grown up in this area, or they're from somewhere else, or they have specialized knowledge of something that the players are going to explore. So I mentioned in the last episode, I'm going to have this rogue who approaches my sample player character party. She's got this information about this buried obelisk. She was on an expedition and she discovered this and didn't tell anyone. So here you have someone, she's got her own objectives. She's a rogue, so she's going to bring specialized abilities to this expedition. She may have done research on the obelisk once she found it that the players don't have to do. But again, then they might pursue, the players might have somebody in their group with arcane knowledge abilities, or they may know someone in town. Again, they can collaborate. They want to keep this a secret. They don't want other people to find out. So here, and she's going to want to run with them because she wants part of the treasure. This is her discovery and she wants to see what happens. So you're going to have, if you go with the rogue, you're going to have an NPC, a hireling, although again, a partner in this expedition. The other thing that's great about information that comes from a hireling is that it's a little ambiguous. If you give information, say background or whatever, to your players in terms of what they've experienced in life, they know it's true, they know it's real. Whereas with a hireling, there's always a little bit, are they telling the truth or not? Now, once they get to know the hireling, they become part of their group, they're going to know whether or not they tell the truth or not. But for a one-shot deal where someone comes to them, say the rogue with the obelisk, what if she finds out something about the obelisk that's a little questionable here, but she doesn't want to tell the player characters because she wants them to help her out? Then when they get there, they find out there's a little more to this than they had bargained for, but now they're in it. Do they just turn around? And again, I set up the rogue, I kind of established her as a little shady, so they know anything she tells them they have to take with a grain of salt. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is battle tactics, because if you fill out a party with hirelings such that you have 5, 6, or 7 members of a party in a group, you can really have good battle tactics in terms of running into monsters both in the dungeon and in the wilderness. When I first started playing D&D, me and my friends, we were all war gamers. So we understood battle tactics. So when you looked at miniatures on a board, in terms of the D&D group and then the monsters attacking, you could see that 2 or 3 characters, you were at a tremendous disadvantage. Right? So let's say you have a 3-person party and you're in a dungeon. You can put the fighter cleric in front and have the spellcaster behind, and that's fine for something that's coming right at you. But what if something comes up behind you? Spellcaster is really vulnerable. If you go into a room, you can have the fighter and the cleric sort of stand in front of the doorway and the spellcaster's in the doorway throwing spells. But again, what if something gets behind them? If you go into a room, no one's there, and suddenly people enter the room from some other place, your spellcaster was vulnerable because you couldn't protect them. So we always would look at that and say, you got to have at least 5, maybe 6 or 7 characters so that you can surround your vulnerable spellcasters. And you can prevent monsters from constantly outsmarting you. Now again, if you have 2 or 3 characters or 1, and I've done this before, you have to adapt how the monsters and how the opponents to your players attack. But it's not very realistic, right? It's not, they're just using poor tactics. You want to be able to use good tactics. You want to be able to defeat these enemies using, where there's no way they could figure anything out because you've got good tactics. The GM isn't letting you off the hook because you don't have enough players. So another advantage of using hirelings is class experience. What I mean by this is your player characters get a chance to play a character of a class that they may not have chosen, right? So let's say you have a monk. He's looking for some lost tome from his temple, and he approaches your players in a tavern or in some situation and explains this, and then he runs with them. So someone's going to run the monk, and they're going to, again, they're not going to do all that much, but they're going to see, how do you run a monk? What kind of strikes do you make? How does a monk attack? What are their abilities? And they learn about it. They may even decide, wow, I kind of like this monk. I want to run a monk, and I want to do one, personalize it with a background and everything that I choose. Whereas they ordinarily never would have. They have favorites that they always run. They always go back to their favorite because they're just used to it. Whereas when you have them run a character that they would never roll up, it opens up vistas in D&D, and it makes you better as a GM because you have these characters in your game. You're watching them be run by someone, not by you. And also, if the hireling stays with your group a while and they advance, the players can get some input in how they think the NPC might want to choose, say, if the feat versus an ability score or this or that. The player characters see how the class works. They see, oh, what you want to do is get this feat, or, the feats aren't really that worth it. Take the characteristic bone. The class experience that can come from running NPCs can be invaluable. So I talked about, the battle tactics and party composition, which really relates to the mechanics of the game and how it works. But there's also a realism to your world that can come with having hirelings, having NPCs out there, because there are adventurers, just like your players, who are all out plying their craft. They're out trying to get ahead and get treasure and whatnot. Also, monsters and evil NPCs or whatever are also trying to survive. So you're not going to run into 3 orcs, right? Even though that's the balance you need in terms of your party composition. And again, at lower levels, yes, you're going to make the encounters lower. But still, if orcs are out in the wilderness and they have a village and they go on a raiding expedition, they're not going to send 3 people. They're going to send a troop out, right? When you have party composition made up with hirelings to balance it out, you can have those encounters. And if you think about real life, if people go into some mountaineering expedition or fishing expedition or exploring, they'll hire a local guide. They'll find someone that knows how to get there, what routes to take, what routes to avoid, where you're going to run into trouble. Why shouldn't you do that in D&D? If you're camping overnight, if you've got 2 or 3 characters trying to do watches, very difficult. If you've got 6 or 7, much easier, much more realistic. Think about it from the other side. If you run into a solo person in the middle of the wilderness, or 2 of them, either they are super deadly, or they are like survivors of a massacre or something happened and they're wandering alone in the wilderness, and their chances of survival are very low. Why? Because they don't have a GM around who's making things and adjusting this and adjusting that so that they can survive. The players wouldn't expect them to survive. They'd say, what's the deal here? Why are these guys wandering by themselves? They must be some very powerful person. Once your players get to that level, if they're a 15th level person, they might be able to run by themselves. But when you're starting out the campaign and you've only got 2 or 3 player characters, you're going to have to either adjust your style, make the encounters lower, make the monsters use poor battle tactics, just attack the front ranks, don't surround the party, etc., etc. And you can do that and it can be fun, but it's not very realistic. And then the final reason for getting NPCs and hirelings to work with your players is really my favorite. It's intrigue. This is mysteries and secrets that the NPCs have, the storylines that they know about, that they can bring to your players. They can bring another perspective on your world that isn't just you telling them this or from their background. And there's tons of examples. So an NPC, a hireling comes along and they're not who they say they are. They claim to be one thing, but in fact they are something else. They're on the run. They're hiding out from someone. They're an escaped criminal, perhaps unjustly imprisoned. They know something they're not telling. As I said, the rogue who finds out about the obelisk, she finds information that this is deadly or whatever, but she's not saying anything. They can be a time traveler or someone from another plane, someone who was held prisoner and somehow escaped onto this plane, or your players free them up, right? They go into some dungeon, there's this person in frozen animation, they free them. Now they're going to run with them. Why? Because they don't know anybody here. They're trying to get back to where they came from. They become a part of the group for as long as this goes on. And the players learn about some conspiracy or some ancient battle that, again, if you're smart as a GM, you'll relate it to the storyline that's going on. And again, an NPC with a secret isn't necessarily a bad person. It may be a secret that they don't want the players to know because they'll get in trouble for this. I was in prison and I don't want to tell you who was, because once they find this out, they're going to chase you or something like that. Or they can be secretly a bad person. Another great thing where you have an NPC that the players meet who they think is one thing and turns out to be evil, turns out to be working for either your big villain or some other minor villain, and they discover this at some point. If you don't have the players run with hirelings or NPCs ever, they don't get that opportunity. They don't get that tremendous game experience of having someone who turns out to be someone totally opposed to them or was tricking them all around. And this is a great moment in terms of running D&D. So there you have it, 6 reasons why I think you should think about using hirelings, using NPCs to run with your players in your Homebrewed campaign. If you've liked what you've seen, if you're interested, please subscribe. Please leave comments. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. Always like to hear these things. In the meantime, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.